Binge the full week ad free over at patreon.com/inspired disorder.
What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.
This is my top 5 A Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I'm ranking them. My top 5. I've only watched, I believe I had only seen the second Freddy's Revenge as a kid. The rest of the franchise was something that I just missed. I wasn't really into horror movies growing up. There were a few times where I remember renting, a few of the classics, but I don't think I've, none of them I've really watched the entire franchise. So I was inspired to watch A Nightmare on Elm Street franchise when podcast that I've talked about before, Screen Drafts. They drafted a Freddy versus Jason mega draft. And I've never seen the Jason movies either, so that might be the next, maybe I'll be doing a top 5 of that coming up in the next month or so. I don't really feel like binging a bunch of horror movies again right away, but I did feel inspired to watch the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and I'm going to be ranking my top 5 right now, starting with number 5 of my Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Top 5, starting off, number 5 is A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Dream Master. So this is the movie that came after Dream Warriors, in which Freddy, or kids, they fight Freddy in the dream. So the premise for the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise obviously centered around Freddy Krueger, who is the burn victim with the glove that has been modified with knives. He is somebody that kills children in their nightmares, which is a great premise for a horror franchise, to have kids afraid to fall asleep. So in in Dream Master, there is a kid. So in Dream Warriors, you have kind of new kids are being, they're in like a kind of a mental institution, and it's all the kids from the parents that killed Freddy. So the kind of the backstory for Freddy is that Freddy Krueger was a child murderer. He got, apparently he was arrested, but got off on all the charges. So a bunch of the parents got together and killed Freddy by burning him alive in his house, I think. So ever since they did that, Freddy has been terrorizing the children of those parents, and that's how the franchise starts. So by number 4, Dream Master, the kind of crux is that there's one of the kids has the ability to absorb the powers. So in Dream Warriors, the kids are able to kind of lucid dream. So they're able to control themselves in the dream state, and they realize that they have special powers when they're in the dream state, and each kid has a different power. Really fun premise. So in Dream Masters, there's a kid that every time a kid is killed, this girl absorbs their dream powers, and she becomes the Dream Master in order to kill Freddy. She's kind of like the chosen one. Kind of a cheesy. It's nice because it's a decent follow-up to Dream Warriors. Kind of extends that idea a bit more. But as far as the actress, it's not the greatest acting. It's not the greatest performance, but it is good enough to be number 5 on my list, which is A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Dream Master. That is my number 5. My number 4 pick for my A Nightmare on Elm Street movie rankings is the second A Nightmare on Elm Street, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. This movie's interesting because even though it's the second film in the franchise, it's really out of the franchise, it's kind of sidesteps. It's almost like a side story or a spin-off story. Instead of following any of the original characters from the first film, it basically is the same house. So the family that lived in the house where Freddy is tormenting in the first movie, they move away, right? Because the wife gets killed, the daughter goes crazy, they sell the house, and this new family is living there, and this new family is being terrorized by Freddy. And it's also different in that in this one, instead of Freddy killing people in their dreams, he is he is implementing himself into those. He's possessing people. So he's possessing this kid that moved in, and good performance, interesting story. I mean, it's kind of a fun new take on it. Well done, but it does, because it strays from the kind of rules of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. I had to put it on number 4 because, but the dream sequences, which is kind of one of the hallmarks of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, are the nightmare dream sequences, which the second one, Freddy's Revenge, it starts with a really cool nightmare sequence where the kid that lives in this house now is on a school bus, and Freddy is the school bus driver, and he's like taking him, and there's 2 girls that are also on the bus, and he takes the bus off road, and it ends up, it's like the dream sequences are like the kind of the cool, imaginative, creative parts of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. And the second one, Freddy's Revenge, has some cool ones. So that comes in at number 4. It's a fun follow-up to the first one, but it's more of a almost like a spin-off more than a sequel. Coming in at number 3 of my A Nightmare on Elm Street movies picks is the 7th film in the franchise, Wes Craven's New Nightmare. This is, aside from the first A Nightmare on Elm Street, this is the second time Wes Craven wrote and directed a Nightmare on Elm Street film. This one came out in 94. So the original came out in 84. So 10 years later, Wes Craven comes back to the franchise. It is amazing. It's like a meta take on it. Basically, it's Wes Craven playing himself, directing a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. Within the movie, the original actress who was in the first Nightmare on Elm Street and the third Nightmare on Elm Street reprises her role, but as herself. So her character name is actually the actress's name because she is playing her quote-unquote self. The looks amazing. The effects are amazing. It has a creepy kid. Her son in the movie is being tormented by Freddy. It's an amazing take on the franchise. It is an amazing reboot. Listening to Wes Craven talk about kind of the ideas or the mythology of Freddy, how Freddy is just this version of this kind of thing that's been around from the beginning of time, of people that of this evil force that haunts people's nightmares. And it also takes the idea of sleep deprivation, how Freddy is able to scare kids enough to not sleep, that even if they keep themselves from sleeping, eventually they'll start to hallucinate. And in those hallucinations, Freddy's able to come and torment them in the real world, which is a kind of an interesting way to blend the overall rules of the franchise, where Freddy only attacks people in their dreams, and is able to kind of marry the idea of what happened in the second film, where Freddy kind of possesses people. And it's not really that he's possessing people, it's that they're just hallucinating from sleep deprivation. So yeah, coming in at number 3 is Wes Craven's New Nightmare. It is So good. Like I almost put it at number 1, but it really only works if you've seen the first movie, the third movie, if you've seen the original A Nightmare on Elm Street, and then see Dream Warriors, because that actress is the one. So there's a lot of references to that, and it really the movie, all the references mean so much more if you've seen at least those 2 movies. So because you have to kind of do homework in order to really appreciate Wes Craven's New Nightmare, I put it at number 3. But coming in at number 2 is the original A Nightmare on Elm Street. You have a young Johnny Depp. You have, of course, the actress who was in the third one and in 7 as the girl who's like being haunted. Her boyfriend is Johnny Depp, who lives across the street. There are some brutal deaths, like when people die in the nightmares. The death sequences are insane. Like when Johnny Depp gets killed, the bed that he's laying in when he falls asleep just starts spewing blood everywhere. Just really crazy scenes. The dream sequences of like people running away in the boiler room where Freddie used to take the children before he would kill them. That is kind of the place where everybody seems to end up in these nightmares in the first one. Just great. I mean, it's got the cheesy 80s horror film kind of acting, kind of look to it, but for the original, it was a great entrance to the franchise. I mean, I would say most of these movies that spawned franchises, the first film in those series tend to be really well done, and that's why they spawned sequels and a whole franchise. So coming in at number 2 is the original A Nightmare on Elm Street. And finally, my number 1, my favorite A Nightmare on Elm Street movie is 3. A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. It is basically the sequel that number 2 never was. The original character is a little bit older. At the end of the first movie, she ends up being trapped in a nightmare, which is just a brutal way to end the movie. She like goes, she thinks everything. She thinks Freddie's gone, and then she goes into a car on her way to school, and then she realizes that she's trapped in a nightmare still, and just is never going to get out. But somehow she gets out. By the third film, she is now kind of studying lucid dreaming and kind of this technique to where that she can battle Freddie on his terms, go into the dream world and fight him there. And Dream Warriors takes place, you're at like this mental institution with all the kids who are the children of the family members who killed Freddie, and they're all in this mental institution because they can't sleep, they all have problems. But when they go into a dream space, they're able to all go inside the same dream together. And as I mentioned before, they have special dream powers, which adds a fun layer to this movie or the franchise in general, where it gives the kids kind of some power to fight against Freddie. And it's just a really fun movie. It's got some fun kills, got some fun horror nightmare sequences. Just a really good, and it's, I think it's I think most people rank Dream Warriors as their favorite nightmare movie, and I agree. I mean, I think Wes Craven's New Nightmare is technically a better made film from top to bottom, better film out of all of them. But because I would recommend watching the first, then the third, and then you could just skip directly to Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and you'll have enough of the information to really appreciate that one more. But that would be the trifecta if I were to recommend somebody that hadn't seen it. And then So let me run through my list. I'll talk about the other films and why I didn't like them. But number 5 is A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Dream Master. My number 4 pick is A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. My number 3 pick is Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which is the 7th film in the franchise. My number 2 pick is the original A Nightmare on Elm Street. And my number 1 pick is A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. Some of the follow-ups, like Dream Child, super corny. It's almost like Tim Burton. Like they watched Beetlejuice. Like whoever directed that, they watched Beetlejuice and was just inspired to do. It got really cheesy too. Like he was delivering like these one-liners that were just horrible. The final Nightmare was horrible as well. It just really like over the top. It just both of those just really over the top, horrible. And then thankfully a new Nightmare came out. Freddy versus Jason was just fun. I've never seen the Jason movies, so it's just kind of a fun slasher. Not a great movie, but it's also really not part of the Freddy oeuvre enough. There's no way that would, even though it was fun, it wouldn't have made the list. And then the reboot of A Nightmare on Elm Street that came out in 2010, I thought was interesting. First off, casting the kids way too old, so didn't care at all from the jump. If they had casted actual kids, then I think it would have been exponentially better. I mean, the look of it was amazing. I kind of digged the new design of Freddie, where he looked a lot more like a burn victim. I mean, it's a different actor, different mannerisms, but the story's kind of stupid. It has a few of the scenes from the first one. Actually, I think it had a few scenes, homages to a few of the earlier in the franchise, but ultimately it was not good. But interesting. I like I would love to see a serious director take on do a Nightmare on Elm Street film, because I think the idea of nightmares and being afraid to go to sleep and how it's something that you can't help but doing, and even extending it into hallucinating from sleep deprivation, I think opens up a lot of possibilities to where if you had a good script, a lot of this movie is just showing really cool nightmare sequences. Like, show nightmares that people have. Like, some of these movies actually had nightmares that people have that made it a lot more realistic, but I think you could do that. I think, making Freddy look a lot more like a burn victim versus, the standard look of Freddy Krueger looked like. I think he was doing a lot of things that were interesting. I just think the execution was a bummer. The Nightmare on Elm Street reboot, couldn't recommend. So let me run through the top 5 one more time. My number 5 pick is A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Dream Master. My number 4 pick is A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. My number 3 pick is Wes Craven's New Nightmare. My number 2 pick is the OG A Nightmare on Elm Street. And my number 1 pick is Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. Let me know what your favorite Nightmare on Elm Street movies are in the comments, or hit me up on social media at Ray Taylor. Get yourself $25 in credit when you sign up for Ting cell phone service. Go through my link, inspireddisorder.com/Ting. That's TING. Get yourself $25 in credit. You can apply that to your bill. You can apply that to a new device. But this is the great cell phone service at a very, very low cost. Works on all the major networks, same low rates, and the best coverage ever. Get $25 off when you go through my link, inspireddisorder.com/Ting, and get your new cell phone service, and thank me later. New episodes of The Ray Taylor Show come out every single day. Subscribe on IGTV, YouTube, and everywhere else podcasts are found. Binge the full week ad-free over at patreon.com/inspireddisorder. Buy Ray Taylor Show merch over at inspireddisorder.com. And follow the show on Instagram at Ray Taylor Show. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!